What about the future characters? I mean, deciding factors. You as a parent, does that come into context? For example, now when you look at a character that, for example, requires romancing scenes or intimacy on screen, and you're a parent, does that at times ride the decision?
Well, that whole, now you're turning into a tabloid paper. How do you,
I'm refraining from words like edgy and sensitive, but it's what people want to know.
Yeah, well, I mean, intimate scenes is something.
No, just as a parent. I mean, again,
no,
because you said you're not discovering the
No, I'm
the
not
morals.
just as a parent, because I think then that would be hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Because I'm just doing everything as a parent.
Okay.
No, I'm not. It would be a lie for me to say that. Because this is my work. This does give me my bread and butter. So I do have to look eventually at where I can find, where I can strike the balance, where I can do what I want to do, and yet at the same time be able to put it out so that I can earn my bread and butter.
And be proud of it years down the line.
And be proud of it years down. So this was my take on intimacy. This was my take on intimacy a year ago, 2 years ago. There are many movies that I...
Would you be more comfortable with the other mic?
Okay. So, we're talking about intimacy.
Yeah.
So I was asked this question a year or 2 years ago, and this was my answer to some journalists when they were asking these questions. Would you ever? I had learned a very interesting thing from a girl that is generally very crazy, but sometimes she makes a lot of sense. In fact, a lot of the times when we've had conversations, I found a lot of sense in what she says. A co-actor that I work with, Sonam Kapoor, and she. I'm talking about the subject of intimacy. I'm not talking about intimacy with a co-actor.
People just woke up when you said Sonam Kapoor.
So what she said to me was, Fawad, always, and I think I didn't provoke it, but she said it, and so I didn't provoke it, but she said, Fawad, never say never. And that's actually what that is, not just with regards to intimacy. It with regards to, let's say, something as mundane as seafood. Some people say they'll never try sushi. I thought I'd never try sushi, and now I think it's one of my most favorite foods. Point being that when the subject then came up in an interview, and someone asked me, what about intimate scenes? I said, well, right now, to be very honest, the audience that I cater to, which is a massive audience, which is mostly a television audience, and cinema being now, for our generation, a relatively newer, local cinema being a relatively newer concept, would not be so comfortable when coming with their families and watching this on screen. So I feel that there are some great stories I'd like to tell, be it Khuda Ke Liye, be it Dastan, be it even something as a rural comedy about a complete, oaf, Akbari Asgari, or for that matter, a movie like Kapoor and Sons, something which is thought-provoking every time, but I'm able to convey the story because I'm not sitting there offending someone. So they're able to listen to me more carefully. I try to be as careful as I can about that. So that is why I feel that this is my approach towards intimacy. And I guess if I talk about my son as well, this would be my approach regarding physical intimacy in grown-ups. When your children come and ask you, when they'll come and ask you about the birds and the bees someday, and you need to know how you approach that. And that's something that I'm learning every day, but I'm trying to do that without offending the people that are around me, or the ones that matter the most to me. I cannot keep everyone happy, but I can definitely try to keep some people happy.
You're not biryani, you can't make everyone happy.
Well,
we have about the last 5 to 6 minutes. I'm not sure if we can open the floor for questions. We're definitely not doing that. But if you have some pulsating questions, you may send it up as a written note to me, and I'll try to accommodate them here. One of the things I wanted to ask you, does a Pakistani drama still excite you, or would you be worried about how it does in terms of ratings and how it's received by the audience now?
You see, every actor, every artist, especially in this age of patronized art, which is not uh, provoked by just simply by thought, but is actually put into some amount of engineering and processing. What I mean to say is, the example I gave of a French artist. I'd love you to actually go and see his work at, and the speech, the keynote speech, compared to what I have done, is actually those are golden words. What he's actually done on TED Talks, and he talks about something very amazing. Can I just briefly tell you about his project?
Yes, please.
So this guy is basically an art. He installs art on buildings as graffiti. Installs life-size pictures, building-size pictures, portraits of people all around the world, and his works have been put up even in America, even in England, in France, and then in some developing areas of South America, the favelas, and in Africa, and in India. And you have to see how it is actually sort of just motivated the change. I'm not going to talk about it at length. You have to see it yourself. If you guys can note it down, and this is again, you see, I see the good side of pop culture. Go on YouTube and you can search this guy. JR is the guy's name, and he's talked at TED Talks, and this is a very interesting thing that he's done with his art. I kind of strayed away. You were saying we were talking about
The Pakistani dramas. Do you
the
think
Pakistani
that
dramas.
they still
yes,
excite
yeah.
you?
So, when I was saying, the point I came to that was because I feel that a lot of our work is brought about by sitting in a room, coming with an idea that will sell to the audience. And seldom do we think, why not try to create a new idea that might sell to the audience? And again, I'll compliment the makers of Budari who've done that. So, when someone asks me, will you get back into dramas? I've got nothing against dramas. Why would I? I mean, it's given me the respect that I initially started out with before I got into movies.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I sort of moved away from it was because, frankly speaking, I just didn't want to repeat the same thing again and again and again and again. I felt things were not becoming different.
Yeah.
So now, if something comes to me, or if I'm able to create something or manufacture something, which is, in my thought, something like have you guys seen Fargo? No one's seen Fargo? Why do you sound so bored? So, I mean, something like that, something like True Detective, or maybe something
Do we have
like
appetite for
Stranger
that
Things.
in Pakistan?
Huh?
Do we have appetite for that kind of a subject?
Why
in
not? I
Pakistan?
think we have, It's, again, like I said, we can delve into fictional subjects. We can delve into various subjects, but going into something socially relevant first would be probably more relevant at first. And I'd love to do that. Something that may be socially relevant, but could be portrayed in a way that is very, that keeps your eye, that you keep on watching. So in that case, yeah, I'd like to come back to dramas if that opportunity presents itself to me.
So our final two questions. Do you think you're superstitious? Anything that you must do before you consider a project to be a go area? Don't sign a contract on Tuesdays. Always wear my favorite bracelet before I do that. Anything of that sort.
No, that's not. You don't need to clap for that. That's not my lucky bracelet. I'm just kidding. I'm just wearing it.
I just picked it up.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Or a lucky color.
no. No, I'm not.
Nothing at all.
I mean,
Who's your good luck charm? Maybe a family member, your
you see,
son?
the thing is that to blame something on someone else or some thing or attribute success to that kind of holds back the potential that you have in yourself, don't you think?
Brilliantly put.
So I think that is where superstition sort of takes away
From your own talent.
potential, from your capabilities, something that you may not know about yourself, but you feel that if I do that, I might just end up, in a bad situation, or that may be bad luck. I mean, losses and gains are a part of life. There'll be ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when you just didn't even exist, yeah, and you were a probability before you came into existence as well. So, इससे बड़ा chance अगर आपने अपनी जिंदगी में लिया है coming into the world, then how can you put the rest of chances on inanimate objects? I mean, you are also just a product of chance.
My last question to you, Fawad. Everyone who is in this world has the responsibility to sort of look at their legacy. What is it that they're going to leave behind? Once it's all going to end, when people are no more gushing you for selfies, I hope that doesn't happen anytime soon, but when and if it does, how do you want people to remember you? What is it that Fawad Khan's legacy is going to be?
You know what? I think I've not come to that conclusion as yet.
Uh-huh.
I'm still
No
trying
tomorrow?
to figure it out. Not really, Sidra. I'll tell you why. We all come here, we play a part, and we leave. And we'd like to have an everlasting impact on
Yes.
someone else's life. But if someone doesn't, and again, this is in context of something that happened recently, and if someone does not offer his congratulations or condolences to you in your bad times and in your good times, it does not make the person bad.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't remember you as the person who left that behind. Sure, it's great. It's a byproduct, I think. If someone would remember that, yeah, Fawad did this when he was there. But अगर मुझे कोई याद नहीं रखेगा, हाँ ठीक है, मेरी शायद रूह को दुख पहुंचे and all that, but you don't owe that to me. So that is why I guess I've never really thought about it. That am I leaving behind a legacy? Because if you actually start thinking today, you get up and you say, yeah, I'm going to do this because I want to be remembered for this, then that is all your pursuit in life is ever going to be.
Yeah.
Just be as much as a material remembrance, maybe on a tombstone, maybe in a footnote in a book. But I feel that if you're really looking for something great, pursue it for what it is. Pursue it for what you love, what really brings you joy. And I guess that will be probably a bigger legacy that you'll leave behind unintentionally.
Thank you so much, Fawad. It was a pleasure talking to you.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
One of the major reservations I have, and I hope as an intelligent Pakistani, is that many of the projects are energy projects, and they're coal-fired. We don't have indigenous coal here, regardless of what they say of Third. We haven't been able to develop it for 65 years. We certainly are not going to do it for the next. The nature of the deposits is such. So here we have a third situation where we are setting up, and they have begun to disintegrate already because the Third coal, the coal project which was to be set up at Engro, they backed off, and now we're finding that one by one they're beginning to dismantle. However, let's move on to the country that we can't live with and we can't live without, and that's India. You have had discussions with S.M. Krishna, and during this you mentioned that there should be an acknowledgement of what you described as prickly stated positions. That kind of brings about the abrasiveness of the relationship. We have a present impasse. We've recalled we've asked them to take eight of their diplomats back. They have sent back accusations, counter-accusations, continuous firing across the LOC. And the most recent is where there is a possibility that we will be reducing, calling back our High Commission, and they will call theirs, and bringing it down to a charge d'affaires level. It's not a happy situation. There's one man who is responsible for this. I think the gentleman who came here and gave a pink turban and arrived. How would you handle Modi if you were today the finance minister, foreign minister?
You know, let's try and break this problem down, okay? Because I have seen in Pakistan, in reaction to what is happening in India, the space for critical analysis reduced substantially in the last few months, okay? And that is not something I wish upon Pakistan, okay? And I would refuse to fall under the pressure of, you know, trying to live up to the patriotic act by being all, you know, goody-goody about how Pakistan has handled this. I think, so in trying to break the problem down, there is the post-Kashmir phase, which we're currently living through, where the violence in Kashmir by Indian state exceeded all expectations and levels of, you know, civilizational decency or norms or etc. And there is the pre-Kashmir problem, okay, pre-Kashmir violence problem. Now within that context also, I was very sad, and I truly mean it, because I think when you're not really in the job but you're looking at everything from the outside, you want some preservation of some of the work that you've done
Of course.
to remain, right? So it was sad that within months of this government taking over, India was back being referred to as the enemy, Dushman Mulk, okay?
Right.
We had stopped that. As a rule within the Foreign Office, we had said in no speech of the Prime Minister, President, Foreign Minister, anyone, you needed permission from as high as the Foreign Minister to allow anyone to make a negative comment about India, okay? And that gave us people abroad, when I would go to Europe, etc., people would recognize that and say they have seen the difference in how Pakistan is dealing with India. This is pre-Modi, of course Modi came in after us. Now, very soon in Pakistan, this changed, okay? We were back to referring, and that gave you a place to speak to the Indians in a very different manner. I remember openly telling Mr. Krishna that we have made this change and all I see you do is to repeat the same things which have been written by your bureaucrats in every forum that we meet. And he was rather embarrassed by it.
Yes.
And he sort of put away his notes on the side, and I think it was a good thing. We had that much trust that I could tell him off and tell him that you are not recognizing the change in Pakistan, you will miss this opportunity.
Absolutely.
And in some ways, India did miss that opportunity.
Yes.
Because India was still obsessed with that, terrorism mantra, and I said, terrorism cannot be an issue with you. It's a bigger issue with us. We're the ones who are losing people every day because of terrorism. And you have one incident and you want to lock up all diplomatic ties, etc. These are incidents we live through on a daily basis, but we don't have the luxury to turn around and blame India every time, right?
BRICS. They tried to raise the issue at BRICS.
Exactly.
And have us declared a terrorist state.
Now post-Modi, this government fell into the trap of matching up to Modi rhetoric, okay? Rather than distinguishing itself.
Okay, but how would you deal with Modi?
By exposing how different he was than the Pakistan which was moving forward and was wanting regional harmony, okay? So I think the Prime Minister did the right thing by going to India when he was invited. I think it was entirely the right thing. Right after that, Modi started literally picking out everything from the wrong playbook. You know, this issue of our High Commissioner meeting the Hurriyat leaders.
Yeah,
As Foreign
you did
Minister,
it.
when
Yeah,
I went,
yeah.
I met the Hurriyat leaders before I met the Indian
Every one of them has.
establishment, and everybody does.
Everybody has.
So it was no exception. It was the rule, and the Indians would always quibble about it and say things about it, and we would always do it. So to upping the ante at that level, Pakistan should have sort of dealt with it in a way which was much less hostile in terms of its narrative, and said that, we want peace, we want dialogue, we want to continue on the course of dialogue. And mind you, because a lot of people say, oh, the circumstances were different when you were there. When there was a moment I remember when I was in New York trying to chair the Security Council meeting, which we had happily gotten ourselves elected to in those times, in those very, very difficult times. And India had said that cross-border LOC, Pakistan had beheaded Indian soldiers. It was their army chief had given sort of aggressive statements and said that we will take revenge, etc. You know what we did? We calmly issued a statement from New York saying, we need to discuss this on the dialogue table. Pakistan is open to discussion at whatever level India chooses, Foreign Minister, Foreign Secretary, Diplomatic, High Commissioner, whatever you choose. And all of a sudden, the temperatures came down, right? So there's a way to deal with.
But to be fair, the present government has, on repeated occasions, through the Foreign Secretary and directly with Prime, held out the sort of olive branch to India and said that we want to open discussions and we wish to have. And of course, this is in consonance with the Shimla Agreement, where we, for different reasons, but we agreed that there would be bilateral things. Let's move now, because it's an education thing, it's done by Beacon House, and that's the future of education. Lenin, the Russian leader, had said, give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed that I have sown will never be uprooted. Well, we've had almost 20 times 4 years. All our social responsibilities seem to have been privatized. From the moment we're born in private hospitals, our lives, we are educated at private schools, minority, they prefer to private schools. When we're ill, we go to private hospitals, and when we die, we go to EDSA, and that's privatized as well. Someone has said that the private sector is focused on profit, not welfare, and the state has to provide all citizens with their basic rights. Citizens should not have to buy those rights. Now, one of the most successful models of social awareness and the provision of social services is, of course, Beacon House, because I think they and a number of other schools care 250,000 children. These are models, and as a Pakistani, I'm immensely proud of the achievements that have been done in this. I'm going to ask you a question, because your children are obviously following the 18th Amendment. Have we missed the bus when it comes to the national curriculum?
I think you can't say that we missed the bus, because there's a you can correct a wrong
Yeah,
anytime,
yeah,
right?
okay.
But have we done what we needed to do? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm very excited that you say it in the way that you do, because you know this is the serious problem that we had with the donors. And I remember speaking to the Americans about it within DC, where, because typically you see in Pakistan, another place where we've outsourced our social responsibilities of the state is to the donor agencies.
Okay.
Who come in droves. Okay, so you know there will be 100 donor agencies who want to fix one school in a certain area,
Absolutely.
right? And then it's more about inefficiencies than efficiencies.
Okay.
So typically they want to work entirely and exclusively with the non-governmental sector. And I remember asking, sitting in I think DC, asking some congressmen the question when they were trying to explain why it is so important for all American assistance to go through NGOs, which I'm supportive of, but some of it should come through the state also. That would you be comfortable with the non-governmental sector handling the entire primary school responsibility within your state? So what you're trying
Want
to
us to
impose on
do.
us or
Yeah.
tell us is the right thing to do. Why don't you start by starting an experiment at home first? So you know it's different standards, right? In
Yes,
some
because
ways.
we're the crucible of experiment.
Sure.
They think they can
Exactly.
get away with
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Somebody once said, I read a report by the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. This is in 1956. And at that time, this report was chilling. It said that there are 3 or 4 flashpoints for nuclear war in the world. North Korea, South Korea, in Russia and the rest. And in India, between India and Pakistan. But Hina, what shook me was the remark that the reason why it's better for the nuclear holocaust to take place in India and Pakistan is because with the sea around India and the Himalayas in the north, any fallout will be contained.
Imagine, yeah.
You know, I said, hang on a moment, are we just
Yeah.
going to be bombed
A billion
you know,
plus people.
simply so that you
Sure.
don't suffer
Yeah.
radioactive?
Yeah.
Anyway, but let me come back to this question of the national curriculum, and I've got a number of questions, so just give me a few seconds. I know, 1 second, just a few seconds. We've covered your youth, we've covered your education, we've covered your career, and a fantastic career, because I think you have become a role model for so many, many women and men in Pakistan, and I mean it quite sincerely. If you had to write your own epitaph, what would you like it to be?
I don't think I can answer it.
Why
right
not?
now.
Too early?
Too early, yeah, for sure. I mean, I
Okay.
think, you know, to be fair, the one thing that I've learned in life is the more you know, the less you know, right? So
Okay.
typically, you're always on a very, very steep learning curve, and at different points in your life, you are undergoing very level of crash courses on a different aspect or a different discipline all the time. And I like to look at life as a journey in which you're on a constant learning curve.
Okay.
So you can't
Fair enough.
define yourself in any particular.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm going to ask you, when the spirit of Hina Rabani Khar
Sure.
looks down on her tombstone, will she want to see Hina Rabani Khar, 26th Foreign Minister, 2nd female Prime Minister?
No,
No?
I have no such aspirations. And certainly I don't want
Why
my
not?
tombstones to say I was the 26th anything.
Okay.
You know, even my visiting card has my name in it and my number, okay? Because I think to define us by the job that you see people, I think in Pakistan we have a tendency, you know, if somebody's been a chairman of a committee and this long list of
X.
things that you've ever been in your entire life, you are what you are, defined by
yes.
self of who and what you are right
Absolutely.
now.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Well, I
So my
wish
tombstone better not carry anything like that. I would be very, very upset.
you stand for elections, I'll vote for you as the Prime Minister. A lot of them, by the way, and there's a whole batch of them, dealt with a lot of the points that we've already discussed, so I won't bore you with repetition of that. First, what is the secret behind your smartness?
God gifted, I have to say, my metabolism. I take it from my father's side of the family. And recently I went to a gym where they asked, you know, where you were supposed to sort of put
Yeah,
your
yeah.
hands there, and they told you your metabolic age. And mine came out to be 24 and I'm 38. So
Wonderful.
that's-
What Henna is saying is YSL and all of the other designers, you don't matter. It's God given. Okay. Somebody else wants to know something, and I think it's appropriate because of the kind of environment we're in here. They want to know about your school life, and particularly kindergarten. What do you remember most about that?
I think kindergarten. I think, yeah, meaning I've just been a very outdoors person, and I always had more friends who were boys than friends who were girls. So I was always much more interested in, typically never into the sewing and the sort of looking after what you're wearing type of a mode. So I've just generally been on that trajectory until I came into politics, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Yashal Jalil, are you here? Yashal? Somebody? You've sent a question, and which is, what do you think is Pakistan moving towards success or deterioration? But I better warn you, you've misspelled deterioration. So back to the classroom, yeah. So how would you say?
Yeah.
Is it moving towards success or deterioration?
I think
Which
by and large,
direction?
if you look at the trends, there are certain trends which are very positive in Pakistan, I have mentioned. But we see these periods where you seem to be falling back. So I would just say, if my biggest concern right now is to let fear guide our future, as we have let it guide our past, certainly. So this fear of India, fear of Afghanistan doing something, fear of the US trying to have a conspiracy, this fear closing the space for real dialogue which will improve the fate of this country. So I think by and large, Pakistan is moving in the right direction, but my fear or my concern would be that we let, because of these fears that we've allowed to sort of grow larger than I think they should have their required place, contract the space for independent thinking, critical analysis in putting this country constantly and consistently on the right course.
Okay. Another question which I've picked out of here is, what should Pakistan do, in your opinion, to come out from the so-called isolation in the world?
Okay, first of all, I don't think we are isolated. I really want to say this categorically, because I don't think a country like Pakistan can be isolated, and certainly India's designs, and it's making a pretty impressive fool of itself in trying to follow a stated policy of isolation of Pakistan is ridiculous. And it's actually, in some ways, India is showing itself to be much smaller than the world wants to believe India to be. Because a country which wants to be a regional power, which wants to have a seat on the Security Council, is obsessed with one much smaller country on its side and is really defining its policy by it. I think India is making quite an interesting fool of itself within that. So, so what is the question?
Okay.
Yeah, have I answered the question?
Yeah, certainly.
okay.
No, please. And here is one which is, of all the 25 predecessors, who's your ideal amongst them as the foreign minister?
Amongst the foreign ministers in Pakistan, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. I mean,
You
I
think
read,
so?
yes, absolutely.
Would you have said that when you were in PMLQ?
Of course, I remember, I never aspired, as I said, I
Okay.
never aspired to be in the position that God, frankly speaking, created opportunities. But I remember as an 8th grader in my village home, where we used to do a lot of reading, read Zulfi Bhutto by Stanley Wolpert, and
Yeah,
I
I remember.
remember being inspired by it to no limit. And any students out here who want to read memoirs, I think Stanley Wolpert's memoirs about all of our leaders, whether it's Jinnah or Gandhi, who was pre-partition, I think as much a Pakistani or people from Pakistan looked up to him also. So Gandhi, Jinnah, Bhutto. I think Stanley Wolpert does a great job in writing memoirs of people from South Asia.
He wrote a rather soft one as well on Mr. Bhutto. I mean, the controversial one about Jinnah was, of course, that he drank and that he used to eat pork sandwiches. And that seemed to be a kind of outweigh what was the quality of that biography. It was a brilliant biography in terms of humanizing Jinnah Sahib. But in the case of Mr. Bhutto, I think what I found of that biography was that he was short on references. And considering that Mr. Bhutto was a man who documented his life with a lot of precision, most of which was all those documents were then taken away during Zia ul-Haq's time. Something which I think all of us should recognize is that Mr. Bhutto, he had a number of foibles, he had a number of weaknesses. In 1971, and I was young in those days, younger, I remember him going to Shimla. And he had no cards to play at all. India had 5,000 square miles of land in its custody in Sindh. It had 93,000 what we call prisoners of war and civilians under protective custody. And these were persons, about 27,000 of them out of the 95,000, were persons who were civilians, bankers, administrators, etc., who had been kept by the Indians unconscionably. Unconscionably, they were kept by the Indians, and they were on half rations. because the POWs were covered by the Geneva Convention
Sure. And the civilians.
and the civilians were not. And they were given half the rations that the POWs had. And when they were released finally, Mrs. Gandhi sent a bill for the food and the accommodation. And Mr. Bhutto, during the Shimla negotiations, I think played a masterful hand, and they realized this afterwards. Because we got back the land, and when they asked him, why didn't you ask for the POWs? He said, because they'll have to return them.
Exactly.
Land we will get first. And so he asked for the land, and then when it became too embarrassing for the Indians, they returned the POWs and the CUPCs. What I'm trying to say is that we tend to forget and we tend to minimize what were the achievements of leaders, and we go into the baser politics of it. But I agree with you that he was one of the outstanding foreign ministers as such, and very well dressed as well. Okay. One final question. I think there was somebody in front. Yes, please. But make it very brief. No speeches. Yeah.
There was mention of Kashmir. I'm from Kashmir, originally from Muzaffarabad, live in Lahore. What's the Pakistan Kashmir policy? Does it have any policy? Yes.
Does Pakistan have a policy regarding Kashmir? Very quickly.
I think Pakistan's stated policy on Kashmir is clearly very repeatedly stated, which is according to the Security Council resolution, you require a plebiscite to be had over there. Once the plebiscite is to be had, the Kashmiris will choose either India or Pakistan. A lot of Kashmiris feel they should have a third choice, right?
Yeah.
I think as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan wants a peaceful resolution to the issue. And any time an opportunity presents itself, as it did in the past many times, Pakistan would like the lives of the Kashmiris, the quality of their life to be improved, and Pakistan would probably be very, very willing to play any role that it does. And can I just say at the end that, you know, it's interesting because when people are in the act themselves, they don't understand as to how they're dealing with it. Because if you were to strategically look at what Modi has done as Prime Minister of India to the Kashmir cause, if anybody wished him to do more for the Kashmir cause, he probably couldn't have.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, recently we heard Mirza Waheed in London talk about how he has made it an irreversible process, that after what he has done to Kashmiris, the pellets, the blinding, Kashmiris will probably never find it appropriate to be able to coexist in an India, which had become almost a reasonable option a few years back.
Yeah.
From back burner, he has made Kashmir come to the front pages of international news all over the world.
Well, no, further. One quotation I've come across, one quotation about Kashmir, and it applies to Kashmir. You can make a throne of bayonets. You can make a throne of bayonets, but you can't sit on it. It's not accidental that Jammu and Kashmir on our side, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, we have not had any problem, no insurrection. And for 70 years on the other side, there's been nothing but. Let me ask you, this is the final remark. May I ask the audience to give a standing ovation to Hina Rabani Khat, please.
Thank you.